Coming up on this week's show, how to breathe new life into your Wii U.
An amazing new game for Typing of the Dead fans.
A We Chat Medal of Honor with the lead designer, Chris Cross.
And the Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each and every Friday with our sponsor, our friends at Bitmap Books. Now, of course, today, talking about Medal of Honor. If you're a fan of first-person shooters, have you seen their incredible new book that just got released, Hurt Me Plenty, The Ultimate Guide to First-Person Shooters, covering the years 2003 to 2010. Now, this covers more than 220 PC, console, handheld, and arcade games as well. All the big ones are in there, of course, Medal of Honor, Call of Duty, Doom 3, Half-Life 2, and a few surprises you might have not heard of or forgotten about. And weighing in at more than 460 pages. You can check it out and the rest of their retro gaming collection at bitmapbooks.com. And brought to you with our friends at PCBWay. Now, of course, you know about PCBWay. If you're in the market for fully featured custom PCB prototyping, low cost, fast turnaround, and always quality boards. And they offer services like 3D printing and injection molding. And check out their shared project section on their website to see what big supporters of the retro community they are. And get an instant quote right now at PCBWay.com. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 482, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And great to be joining us for another show, the podcast that comes out right at the end of the week, every Friday, start of the weekend. We just love doing this, don't we? When work's finished and we get to focus on our favourite thing in the world. We get to geek out about classic video games for an hour or two.
Yeah, and, you know, we get to talk about series that we absolutely loved when we were growing up. And we also get to talk to, you know, the people behind them. And this week is no exception. Like, we're talking about one of my favourite titles, Medal of Honor. So I absolutely love that series. Joe, were you a Medal of Honor fan?
You know what? I didn't really play them. My older brother had them. He had Medal of Honor Underground for the PS1 that he played to death. And I watched him play through that quite a bit. And at the time, like, GoldenEye was everything. And I was like, oh, Medal of Honor seems a bit different. It seems a little bit more like, you know, you can't just run in and gun. You got to think about what you're doing. And as a kid, that for me was like, oh, that's clunky. I don't want that. But actually, looking back, it was probably more ahead of its time. And you just had to actually think about more of what you were going to do and sneak around and stuff rather than just running
well,
and
that's
running.
a great description of it because, you know, we talked to Chris Cross, who was the lead designer of Medal of Honor. And, you know, he tells us exactly that about how its kind of roots were in GoldenEye, but also, you know, that kind of realism and that slower pace of gaming really helped with also historical references as well. There's some really interesting connections as well because, you know, Chris previously worked for Blizzard with QA, and then he also went on to DreamWorks Interactive with, of course, you know, Steven Spielberg on board there. There was a lot of connections with Saving Private Ryan, but also, strangely, a connection with Jurassic Park and Medal of Honor.
It's interesting as well you mentioned about the controls as well, though, because obviously when Medal of Honor came out, we did talk to Chris in the interview about this as well. You're playing GoldenEye on your N64. That analog stick, you know, was really important for FPS games, but, you know, trying to work with the standard PlayStation D-pad, I mean, you know, because those analog controls weren't standardized yet, so it took a lot of thought, didn't it, to get an FPS game running that well on the PlayStation, having stuff like intuitive targeting and auto-aim, you know, stuff that we take for granted these days, but having an FPS game that ran that well, that didn't need kind of PC mouse precision, I think was really a good design choice.
Kind of bringing those FPS games to consoles and, you know, also the hardware hacks and kind of tricks that they used. And also the generations, you know, it started out on the PlayStation and we went through to the PlayStation 3. You know, there was a Xbox 360, you know, all these kind of developments and how the series changed and also the locations of the series as well. Because Medal of Honor Rising Sun is the fifth game and one of my favourite in the series as well.
Yeah, I mean, you did mention Jurassic Park there as well, and that's one story that we do explore with Chris as well, because he worked on Trespasser, which is a kind of an infamous game, really, isn't it? Because that was really hyped back in the late 90s. It was part of the Jurassic Park series by DreamWorks. Even had like Richard Attenborough in there as well, and Minnie Driver. famously flopped. I think it sold like 50,000 copies. It was voted the worst video game of 1998. I think Chris mentioned it's actually got the record for being the most returned game of all time at that stage as well. So we kind of talked to him about that and kind of what went wrong with it, because it's a really interesting story. Something as big as Jurassic Park, you wouldn't think that could fail.
No, and I think it's really interesting because, Chris has been in this industry for a long time. He's got a lot of people that worked in the industry with him as well, and he does a podcast as well. So he's
Brain Arcade.
Yeah, he's also a fellow podcaster. So it's a really interesting chat. I really enjoyed this interview.
Yeah, so Chris is going to be our guest on the show in around half an hour from now. I'll link his podcast in the show notes if you want to check that out as well. But of course, the first half of the podcast, that's when us guys get to geek out for half an hour or so about the stories that have caught our attention this week and bring you up to speed on what's been happening in retro. And I imagine you were all over this story, Ravi, being our resident Wii U fan, which is kind of nuts to see us considering the Wii U as a retro system. I mean, it is over a decade old now, but it kind of feels like, to me, almost a bit like the Dreamcast, one of those systems that had a lot of potential, but just really didn't.
You know why I consider it a retro system? Just because it's so good at the virtual console.
Yeah, emulation.
Emulation and the hackability of it as well. So you can really turn it into a bit of a powerhouse in regards to that. And this is an interesting story because I didn't know about this, and I'm usually like really hot on the Wii U scene.
Yeah,
I didn't know this had popped up. So, but what is this?
So this is, if you've, I'm sure most of our audience remember the Wii U. It was an interesting system that was really a console of two halves, wasn't it? You had the actual console itself, small little box that went under your TV. The other half of it was kind of like a proto Switch, I guess you could say. It had this gamepad, didn't it? Which actually you could play games on, but a lot of games, the idea was that you play half the game on the TV and half the game on the screen.
And you could only be at a certain distance as well. So I've actually seen videos of people making portable Wii U's where they've got the Wii U running off a battery and they've got it in a backpack and they're walking around with the pad like it's a kind of a Switch.
I remember though, when the Wii U came out, I remember sitting on my balcony in my apartment that I lived in then, which was, through the balcony doors was probably about a meter and a half away from the TV, but actually being able to sit out there and play Mario Kart on the gamepad, kind of like you do now with the Switch, which felt very cool. But like you said, you had to be in range of the console for that to work.
Yeah, and, you can have Wii accessories as well. You can have the Wii U Pro controllers as well, which also work on the Switch, and I really love those controllers, actually. But what we're talking about here is the gamepad. Now, the gamepad has had a few problems over the years. Battery life is notorious in them. I've swapped mine out a couple of times.
Is it replaceable battery, or have you got to?
Yeah, pretty easy.
Okay.
Just put a screw in the back and get like a third-party one or something. Put it in there, quite cheap. But this is if you don't actually have one. It's a solution for emulating it. Now, there is a way of hacking the Wii U. It's got a wonderful environment called Aroma on it, which I use. And you can load loads of different programs into Aroma. So one of the programs is called Blue Pair, which is one where you can kind of get your Xbox One controllers and you can get your dual shock controllers, your 8-bit DOE or whatever, and you can sync them with the Wii U as well. So you can actually connect to your older ones. This is a bit different. So, of course, you've got that screen on the gamepad.
Yeah.
So this is called Vanilla. It's a little program that enables you to actually capture the input of a controller and have that little screen displayed as well. So what you can do is you can have a PC that will receive this kind of little screen coming from the Wii U, showing you what's displayed on that little controller pad. But then you can also select the input, and the input can be any controller that you've got connected over this kind of Wi-Fi network. So you could have something connected to your Steam Deck, or you can have it
like an Xbox controller or something.
Yeah, or even on your Android phone.
And
you can have it connected.
And I'm glad you answered that for me, because my question was going to be, because I was watching the video of this, and my initial thoughts was it was just simply a replacement if the screen broke, because in the video I watched, the guy sets it all up, but then he's sat playing it, looking at a laptop screen, but he's still using the Wii U screen, like Wii U gamepad. So he's
that's like the method to display it.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so it's just a different screen. So if you've cracked the screen of the gamepad or it's just failed or whatever, then you can play it through, like you say, through a laptop or through a phone or whatever.
Oh, but you can even tape a phone to the gamepad.
Yeah, but it's good to know that you can actually then just plug in an Xbox One controller and use it like that as well. That's really cool. Because that definitely opens it up a lot more. Yeah, that opens it up way more. I just thought it was just a screen replacement. And I was a bit like, okay, that's kind of cool. Because they never released like separate screens for the Wii U, did they, in the UK?
No.
But yeah, that's pretty cool that you can just connect a controller then to like the laptop or to the, to the Android phone or whatever.
They did bring out a pretty nice Pro controller for the Wii U, which I've got one of those, and they're really comfortable.
Which interestingly, the Pro controller, it's really important that you get one with the official Wii U logo on there, because there's a lot of third-party ones, and they don't work with stuff like the GameCube emulation.
Yeah, right.
So you need to have that kind of logo on there and get the proper one.
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, Joe, Nintendo didn't sell third-party replacement gamepads over here. I think they did in Japan, but and you probably see them all the time. I do when I'm walking around gaming markets. You know, kind of just half a Wii U, without the gamepad, and obviously a lot of games are not going to work.
And I think if you've got a mate around and you haven't got an extra gamepad, and you're like, oh, I want to put you in as player too, something like that. You can connect your Switch and then use that pad, or you can use a Raspberry Pi. So this is pretty cool. Obviously, the Switch needs to be rooted with a firmware patch, but still, I think that's quite cool bringing these like devices together. And interestingly, as well, it has a mic option on there as well, because I think there was some kind of messaging service for the Wii U. So you can
the microphone built in. Yeah. That's pretty cool though, that you can basically reduce the Switch to a second screen for your Wii U. In Ravi's mind, that's where the Switch should have always been, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
it's finally reached its true potential.
Yeah. So, very cool. If you want to read more about that, and I'll link up that project. Looks really, really interesting, and definitely useful if you have got, as I mentioned, half a Wii U that's in need of a screen or just an extra controller. So I'll put that in this week's show notes. Now, while we're talking about Nintendo systems, and again, that I absolutely love, always reminds me of this time of year, actually, Outrun. To me, that's a summer game. I mean, obviously, the game itself, that kind of beautiful beachside California vibe to it. And I remember playing it in the arcades in the school summer holidays. Just hearing like Splashing Wave just makes me think of summer back in the day. So, again, I love playing this time of year. But obviously, I mean, a lot of us are going away this time of year. You might be traveling all over, going on holiday, going away for work. What about playing Outrun on the Game Boy Color? That would have been nice.
It would have been nice. And this, I don't know, I kind of had, is it the Mandela effect? Kind of like, maybe not the Mandela effect.
Well, you thought it did happen.
I thought this had already happened. So this is Outrun on the Game Boy Color. And the article says, we never got Outrun on the Game Boy. And I was like, I'm sure we did. I'm sure it did come out on the Game Boy. And I went in and I Googled it. Apparently not. No, it never came out on the Game Boy. But in my mind's eye, I feel like I've played it on that green monochrome screen, and it must be another racing game I've played on
on a Game Gear, maybe,
or maybe on the Game Gear, maybe. But the Game Gear is obviously color. But yeah, this is Outrun for the Game Boy Color. It looks really nice and it runs really, really nice. Some of the comments are saying it looks just as good as the arcade version.
Maybe if you squint a bit from the other side of the room.
Maybe if you squint. There's nowhere near as much going on like at the start. Famously at the start of the arcade and like the Mega Drive version and stuff, there's all the people around you and, there's the woman who comes and gets in your car. It doesn't look like any of that animation is in there. But the actual gameplay itself, driving down the street, driving down the desert, overtaking other cars, the trees, the palm trees and everything, that looks fantastic. And this looks, absolutely at home on the Game Boy Color. I'm curious whether to see if the guy who's made this has made this from the ground up or if he's used another game, because the pixel art in this and, everything in it looks really, really nice. I'm not too sure whether this is, maybe the Game Gear version, like Ravi's just said, and it's repurposed. I'm not familiar with that one. But, either way, it does look really nice.
We didn't mean to belittle it when we were saying it doesn't look as good as the arcade. Obviously, it's running on much more limited hardware than an arcade board. But I think it looks really nice on here. I mean, the good thing about this is he's put it up for people to download it for free. I mean, obviously, it is a Sega trademark, and we know they have been a little bit more takedowny lately than they used to be. So it makes sense that he's definitely not charging for this or anything. But I think it looks like it would have played really well on here. And he's calling this a demo / prototype. So he's saying, look, don't get in touch and point out what's missing. He knows there's stuff missing from it so far. But really, the idea of this is, look, it's outrun on the Game Boy.
She's not getting in the car at the start.
Yeah, the music sounds slightly different. A little bit changing key there. But yeah, I think it does look really nice so far. And I imagine it's going to be a work in progress as well. And what's interesting is there's actually a few different flavours of it that you could download from his itch page. He's got a version made for the Game Boy Color itself, also works with emulators, but also a version for the Analog Pocket as well, which I haven't compared the two versions, but could be slightly different or a bit more enhanced maybe for that. But I think, I'm very impressed at how smooth it runs, because it looks really, really nice, doesn't it? Very impressive for the hardware it's running on. And,
it looks like a good job, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I love a good racer, so it might be a good excuse to get the Game Boy Color fished out the wardrobe this summer for the holiday. So very good work. So if you want to check that out, I'll put that in this week's show notes as well. Now, this might bring back a few nightmares for Joe. We've talked about this story before on the podcast. One of our early meetings when we went out for a few drinks back in the day, Joe, and you ended up back at my house. Makes it sound a bit sleazy, don't I, saying that?
Yeah.
Our girlfriends were friends.
Got me drunk and took me back to your apartment, did you?
Didn't take many drinks to get Joe back to mine. But we actually got the Dreamcast out, and you played Typing of the Dead on my Dreamcast, which is a version of House of the Dead that I made you play before you thinking, God, I'm really bad at this, until you realised I was making you play on a German layout keyboard.
Yeah, that really confused me. I put it down to being drunk, and I couldn't find like the @ symbol or the question mark. I was like, where the hell are they? But
makes the game slightly more tricky, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that came about because of I can't remember how it came about, but you mentioned Typing of the Dead, and I didn't know it had ever come out on the Dreamcast. I thought it only ever came out on the PC. And you were like, I've got it, and my Dreamcast is actually set up. Came around to your flat. It was all ready.
Let me go fetch my fancy keyboard.
All ready for me. But yeah, this is interesting. People are calling it a successor, if you will, inspired by, etc.
Explain how Typing of the Dead works, because there might be people that haven't played it.
So obviously, House of the Dead 2, so any of the House of the Dead games, but House of the Dead 2 it's based on. Light gun game, you're on a fixed rail shooter, so the game moves for you, etc., and you just shoot at the screen, don't you? You shoot at the zombies. In Typing of the Dead, they replaced the guns with keyboards on the characters, and as the zombies run at you in the screen, absolutely same game, same gameplay and everything. It's just rather than shooting at the zombies, they have words above their heads or sentences above their heads, and you have to simply type it out. And as you type it out, it fires the bullets at the zombies. So the quicker you type, quicker you kill the zombie. But obviously, if you make mistakes,
don't make a mistake.
If you make a mistake, does it start the word again? If I remember rightly, I've not played.
Oh God, now you're asking.
Now I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it might actually.
I think it starts the word again, and it gets pretty tough when you first start out. It's like just single letters, or it'll just say like the or gun and stuff like that, and then all of a sudden you'll get like zombie, and then all of a sudden you'll get like, the onomatopoeia is over here, and you must. You're like, bloody hell.
You type in half a novel in by the end of it. Yeah.
So it's a fun game. Really, really gets you laughing, and get you stressed out as well. But the reason we're talking about this is there is a new free. Well, I say new. There is a free Warhammer game, Warhammer 40k Boltgun. It's called Words of Vengeance. So it's Warhammer 40,000 Boltgun Words of Vengeance. So obviously Warhammer, massive franchise, at the moment, Games Workshop, etc. All over the place, actually. They're doing really well at the moment. But I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, Boltgun came out, which is, as they call, a boomer shooter. So very heavily Doom inspired, but based on Warhammer 40,000. Specifically, one of the famous games, I'm not familiar with this one, called Grimdark. I know a bit about Warhammer, but I don't know loads about it.
I think Ravi's our man mainly there.
He is our man mainly there, but
I used to play Dawn of War quite a lot. That was quite a great title. Yeah.
Oh, okay. But yeah, that was a boomer shooter, played like Doom, within the 40k, franchise, and you played as Space Marines, I believe. From looking at it, they look like Space Marines to me. Correct me if I'm wrong, sorry guys.
Yeah, very, very Doom.
But this game that came out this week, which is completely free to play, is a Words of Vengeance. It essentially plays like Typing of the Dead. So it's obviously in the original Boltgun game, you would walk around yourself like you would in Doom and explore the level, shooting the monsters, etc. Whereas in this one, it's fixed you to kind of like a rail, so it runs through the level for you. But as you come up to the enemies, you have to type to shoot them. But what's interesting about it is it's made the words are very relevant to, like, from what I can see, like very relevant to Warhammer. So it's not just like the and zombie and gun and stuff like that. It's like Citadel and Purge and Space Marine, and it looks really fun. But I guess the main takeaway of this is they've released it for free, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Do you think it's a skill that we're starting to lose with like mobile phones and stuff? I've worked with quite a few young people, and the way they type, they're pressing the buttons very slowly. And I think, something like this would help increase the skills.
It could be the new Mavis Beacon.
The new Mavis Beacon, yeah. I remember there's a lot of old typing competitions back in the day. And I'm just looking some up at the moment. And Das Keyboard are actually doing the ultimate typing competition. And you can win $5,000 for typing fast. So,
my words, is it words per second or words per minute?
Yeah. I remember it was a thing that people used to put on their CVs.
Yeah.
What?
Words per minute that
I review CVs at work, and I've seen a few people still put like their words per minute in there, and I'm just like, oh yeah,
give them a job. That's
give them a job. Give them a job.
That's cool.
You should train them on this, Joe. Test them out when they come in at the interview. Yeah.
You know what? I'm terrible at these kind of like games as well. Like, because of people would think, having a guess, like watching me type at work or whatever, I can type really, really fast. I can when I know exactly what I'm saying, and it's kind of like, if it's just a standard email that I'm sending out, churning out the same kind of stuff every day. As soon as I actually have to think about what I'm typing, I get a bit like what Ravi was saying. Like, I'm looking at the keyboard like, what was I saying?
The keys have moved around. What's happening?
Yeah, honestly. And I get proper fat fingers. So I wouldn't be very good at this, but I do want to give it a try. Just, to relive the nostalgia of playing House of the Dead with Dan as well. But this does look really cool. And I actually haven't played Boltgun, so I kind of want to go back and play that.
You just need to find a German layout keyboard. So,
yeah. So you feel right at home.
Yeah.
Looks like the kind of game where the choice of keyboard's probably quite important as well. I mean, I'm sitting in front of one of those, really slimline Apple keyboards, but I imagine you mentioned Das Keyboard there, playing this on an old school kind of mechanical keyboard, I imagine.
Yeah, all the keyboards in my house are mechanical, and my neighbours probably hate it. I'm like,
he's up typing at 2 a.m. again, playing those typing games. But yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, it's free. You can't beat that price. So even if you haven't played that type of game before, it is lots of fun. So definitely worth a try. I'll link that in this week's show notes too. Now, you mentioned your Das keyboard there, Ravi, which is a mechanical keyboard. I've got one of those in my office. Have you ever looked on the bottom of it?
Yeah, there's like a ruler that I keep knocking out. Yeah.
It has a magnetic ruler.
Pull it out at the moment. Yeah.
Which annoys me every time I try and clean mine. It falls off. I'm like, oh, I forgot that. I never use that. But this is actually a ruler that I might use, because if you have a job where it's acceptable to have a ruler on your desk, this could break your day up a little bit. What about a ruler with a built-in games console?
This is awesome. This just it kind of shows me how far we've come. I remember those Casio watches with little games on them that somebody would have at school, and then we got Snake on the phone and stuff like that. But this is insane. It's a tiny little screen on a ruler, and it seems to be 3D printed as well. And the thing I love about this is it's so flat. All the components are kind of there, and this isn't just a small thing that plays a little LCD game. This is a pretty crazy device. You could emulate on this the NES, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game & Watch, Master System, just loads of systems. Retro games, it's USB charging. It's pretty mental, to be honest, especially for a small project.
Yeah, now this is a guy called Raphael Texia. And as you mentioned, it's essentially a very small emulation device that would fit in your pencil case. So, the size of a ruler. But you've got all the controls on the back of it as well. And it does have the measurements at the top. So if you do need to take a quick measurement of something, it could pass as an excuse to have this on your desk.
Let's not forget it is a ruler. let's make sure.
Could it be banned from school?
Let's make sure it's got them damn measurements on it.
It's a way to get a pass if you're in maths class and you've got this on your desk and you're having a bit of a blast of Mario or something. But it is part of my stationery. Which again, this time of year, as you probably still see Ravi, working in the education sector, getting a new stationery pack was always a highlight of back to school. New protractors and compasses and stuff. So it does feel very seasonal, buying a new ruler. There's actually 12 buttons and 2 shoulder buttons on this as well. And can emulate loads of things on here. So you mentioned NES, Super Nintendo games. Some of them can play on here. Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game & Watch, Master System, Mega Drive, Game Gear, Lynx, PC Engine, ColecoVision, MSX, and of course, it can play Doom.
Of course it can.
So
Can't play Boltgun, Words of Vengeance.
Yeah. Not Crisis yet, by the looks of it, which I imagine that'll be a meme that, it can't be too far away. We used to joke about, can it run Doom? It's always, can it run Crisis? I probably will be playing Crisis on a ruler in like 10 years.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome and quite a nice price, £37.
Yeah.
It can do all of these things. It's really smart as well. The PCB is the ruler. It's all kind of printed on there and then like little customizable 3D printed cases as well and shells. So, you can have a custom color on there, or you could probably color it in if you sat there, playing on your ruler. Yeah.
Well, this is running on Kickstarter at the moment. Finishes on Sunday, June the 15th. At the time of recording, he's nearly made his target. He only wants £1,677. He's at 1,530. Probably will have past that by the time the podcast comes out, I'm sure. But if you want to back that, like you said, Ravi, just a great bit of fun, isn't it? And something to have in your desk or your pencil case. Really affordable price as well. So definitely, if you want something that's a little bit of novelty and would have definitely made me fail all of my exams at school.
It blows my mind. We had the Magpie magazine give away the free Raspberry Pi on front of a magazine
like 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I'm just like, and now you've got this like bin ruler is probably more powerful than some of the machines I've got in my house.
Imagine, if someone give you that at school, you can play Super Nintendo games on your ruler, they've been like, no way will that ever happen. But it's here. So if you want to back that, I'll link the Kickstarter link in this week's show notes too. Now, while we're talking about things that you could have on your desk, USB sticks, plenty of them on the modern desk these days. And this is quite an interesting story. This is something that I played with a little bit in the past. This is an operating system that is called, I believe you pronounce it Aros. I used to call it Aros, but someone corrected me once. It's not Aros, it's Aros. And this is basically I say modern version, but something that's been around for about 30 years now. It's a successor, an open source free successor to the old Amiga Workbench.
Yeah, I remember when this very first started. It's a long time ago. And
1995.
What they were trying to do was kind of create a replacement, which they have. The whole project has been kind of funded through, I remember, bounties. So people would put out like, oh, can we get this driver created? Could we, get this Kickstart ROM replaced? Can we get this, piece of work implemented in it? And then they'd put the bounty out and then someone would go, yeah, sure, I'm going to pay that, which actually is really interesting because back then it was kind of like a little model for kind of crowdfunding, Kickstart, before that kind of happened. It's great to see how it's developed. So many people have worked on it and put effort into it. And it's really in a good, usable state as well. Of course, it was an attempt to modernize the Amiga OS, but also break free from the shackles of companies owning it and making it kind of free for everybody.
Yeah, and I've played around with it before. I actually did a video on my YouTube channel probably 2 or 3 years ago, which, because the thing about Aros is, I mean, obviously the Amiga operating system ran on Amiga hardware, but Aros was made for standard PCs. So you can run it on a, standard x86.
Yeah, I think
64.
there are versions that can run
on the Amiga.
On the Amiga as well, but it is primarily based for the x86 platform, and then I think it's moved on as well from there to modern.
It was like an ARM port as well, I think. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, really, the thing that attracted me to it when I first saw it is the fact that you can basically run a modern Amiga-like operating system on your PC. You don't need to go out and buy new hardware or anything. And it's got, some nice mod cons in there. You've got like a Wi-Fi network stack in there. It's got USB support, nice high-resolution HD screen modes as well. So it's kind of like using a really souped-up Amiga. But the reason we're talking about this is if you haven't used Aros before, there's because it used to require a little bit of setting up, and it was a bit fiddly, for people that didn't know the way around it. But there has been a brand new portable distribution that has just been released this month. So basically, you download a USB key image, and the image is 3.2 gigabytes. When you uncompress that, it fills a 16 gigabyte USB stick. And the great thing about this is if you've ever used anything like Amiga Forever or Caffeine OS, stuff like that, it's all pre-set up, pre-configured, and has all the software installed.
Live boot off it, don't you? So you
don't need to install it,
and then select it as your boot device, and then boom, go. And the thing as well is, as with these things, there's lots of different builds as well. So it's good to see this build. But there's also Aros 1, there's a Tiny Aros Icarus is another one. And I think it was Aros Broadway as well.
Yeah, that was another one.
Which was one. Yeah, there's always been quite a few like little builds and custom things. A
lot of them come and go and don't get supported anymore, though, which I think it's quite nice to see like a modern distribution that has been actively maintained. Usually
a few people working on it, or a small amount of people. I know Steve Jones put a lot in to actually help, back in those days, get stuff going as well. And there's been I think Neil Cafferty, we met him at Amiga Island. There's I've probably said your name wrong, Neil, sorry. But you
normally say it after a few pints of Guinness, don't you?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people around the world that have really, created this and made something beautiful.
And that's the thing. I mean, us guys, being well into the Amiga, you and I, Ravi, it's always been a thing you hear people cry for, make the operating system open source. Well, someone's done it. So if you want to give it a try, then it's here for you now. And like I said, 16 gigabytes of software installed. That is a hell of a lot of Amiga software, isn't it? So plenty to go through there as well, and completely free. So you want to download that image and check out Aros, because, it might have been something you've kind of read about in the past and thought it was a bit tricky to install, but now you can just plug a USB stick into your PC. Don't have to install or change anything on your hardware, and just enjoy and explore. So that's available now. So I'll put that, and of course all the rest of the stories, you don't have to Google around. I save you the job each week. I put them in the show notes on your podcast app, or you can click straight through from our website at theretrohour.com. We have got a Patrons Hangout coming up this weekend as well. We did move it because last weekend, bank holiday, everyone was all over the place. So Sunday night from 8 p.m, if you want to come on. Hangouts are always a laugh, aren't they, Joe? You look forward to the Hangouts.
You're all right, yeah.
Yeah, a bit of a giggle.
Yeah, no, they're wicked. Honestly, I always look forward to them. It really is just like hanging out with mates, just sitting back, listening to everybody's stories, chatting a little bit about our own stories. But it's just like going to the pub, really. For us, obviously it's 8 at night. A lot of people come on from like America and stuff like that. And, we've had people on from Australia and stuff. So I get it. Sometimes it's a before work thing, or you're doing the day thing, but it really is cool just hanging out with everybody and just talking about what we've been up to for the last month, sharing retro stories, retro tech, etc. It's wicked. Meeting new people as well, yeah.
Yeah, we always welcome on new people. Very welcoming bunch. So if you want to join this weekend's hangout, all you've got to do is sign up to our Patreon, which you can check out from theretrohour.com. Lots of other perks on there as well. We also do a bonus podcast called The After Hours for our gold members or above. There's going to be a new episode of that dropping in the next couple of weeks. And we also give you like 10 minutes of extra news stories on every single episode of this podcast, because we chop the ads out for our patrons. So rather than giving you a shorter show, we actually give you a few extra news stories. So they're on the way for our patrons in a minute. And we have got a couple of new patrons to induct into the most prestigious high score table in the world of retro gaming, and that is the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. I'll let you guys induct them.
Hall of Fame!
Who we got first, Ravi?
First, we've got Scott.
And Lee Mintram.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate your support. Of course, Lee Featurecast, who's a big friend of the podcast, worked on some incredible game soundtracks, Final Vendetta and stuff for the Utah Saints as well. So thanks for the support, Lee and Scott. Really appreciated. And if you'd like to join our wonderful patrons community, all the details over at theretrohour.com. Okay, this week's special guest, we're going to be talking to Chris Cross, Medal of Honor special, lots of stories about Blizzard as well. He's on the way in just a second. Before we do, let's just take a quick moment to give a huge thank you to this week's sponsor. It is our wonderful friends at... You know that sound by now. It's our friends at Shopify. Now, we love Shopify. Maybe this time of year is, you might have a bit of time off work. Maybe you're off with the kids over the summer holidays. Maybe you're thinking this is the year when you finally start your own business, or maybe a bit of a side hustle or something. Everyone's doing that at the moment. You know, it's really important to have a little backup, isn't it? And, you know, a little extra source of income. But the thing about starting your own business or doing anything for the first time, that setup process can be really intimidating. You know, suddenly you've got loads of hats that you got to wear. If, you know, like when we started this podcast, for example, having to learn how do you host a podcast? You know, what platforms do you put it on? How to do show notes, how to do editing, all of that as well. It's the same in any business. But the good thing about Shopify is they are your business partner that has basically got everything you need to start, run, and grow your business. They are the commerce platform that are powering millions of businesses all around the world, including household names, Mattel, Gymshark, our friends at Bitmap Books use them as well, to brands that are just getting started. It can be as small as, you know, my missus runs little embroidery business that she does on the side, selling at trade shows. She sells the stuff on Shopify. We put our books on there as well. So it's basically like getting started with your own design studio. Now, I mentioned we sell our books on there. The thing that really attracted us to Shopify is just how easy it is. Because, I mean, we've tried in the past using WordPress plugins to run our own commerce platform and still have nightmares about that, don't you, Rev?
Yeah, I still have the fear of waking up sweating at night, you know, because there's no customer support. And
it's gone down.
Yeah, having that 24-hour customer support is absolutely amazing. And I think, you know, stuff like a reliable checkout and a really fast one as well that's customizable. I think that's really important because, you know, you want to make that sale and you want to get it done as quickly as possible when people are going to kind of make that decision. It's great as well because in person you can have a point of sale unit as well. So you can have your whole stock list on there. You can take card payments on the move, which is just absolutely fantastic if you're at a show or, you know, you've joined a market or a fair.
Yeah, Village Fate's coming up this time of year. A lot of them going on. And they've got those gorgeous ready-to-use templates as well. You know, click of the mouse, match your brand style as well. It's also packed full of helpful AI tools to help you with your product descriptions and page headlines and even enhance your product photography as well. So it's really like having a marketing team and a business expert working with you so you can focus on the thing you love doing, which, of course, is running your business. So turn your big business idea into actual sales with Shopify by your side. Now, of course, we want you to give this a try. If you sell anything at all, give it a go. It's a no-brainer. You can try it out for just £1 a month, or $1 a month for our American fans. So all you got to do is use this link, shopify.co.uk/retro-hour to claim that $1 or £1 a month trial period. Give it a go. No-brainer. See what you think. And of course, use our link. Helps out the podcast, shopify.co.uk/retro-hour, and get ready to hear a lot more of this. All right, well, thank you for checking out the news this week. We'll have more for you, of course, on next Friday's podcast. And next, going inside the world of Medal of Honor with our special guest, Chris Cross, is next on the Retro Hour podcast.
We're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and we're here today with the original lead designer of Medal of Honor, and I absolutely love those games. Worked at Blizzard as well, Warcraft II, Diablo, and it's Chris Cross. How are you doing, Chris?
Great. How are you guys doing?
Really good, and it's good to have you on because you've worked on so many titles. Homefront was one later on that is a particular favourite of mine as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
really?
Absolutely loved it. I was
A lot of
wondering.
ex-Medal of Honor guys on that, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering, well, what was your first video game experience then? What was the first kind of experience that stood out to you?
There's two that stand out that, like, when your brain sparks, right? You're like, oh my God, what is this thing? Need to have it in my life. There's a fascination. And I think the first time was walking through a bowling alley and seeing like Space Invaders and different stuff, and then thinking like, oh, I want some colors, and like, and then the first time I saw Donkey Kong, and so that experience of walking through, having a couple quarters, but then having the FOMO basically of like, oh my God, I want to go back and play these. Like, I need to. How do I do this more? And I'm of the age where basically I was an arcade rat for a long time, so I did a lot of like, I rode my bike all over town. I knew when new games would show up at the 7-Eleven. Like, I knew the schedules, right? And so basically I played everything under the sun in the 80s and the early 90s, and then that naturally progresses, consoles, etc. I had a NES, I had an Atari 2600. I couldn't afford all of the consoles I would have liked, but basically I'm old.
It must have been a very exciting time, though, like a brand new industry emerging.
So it was super interesting, especially in the like arcade was big for me as a kid because they were constantly releasing new things. Production times were shorter, so you could expect like a new cabinet frequently, and especially once they got super efficient and started reusing cabinets, etc. Like, it became very, very rewarding to go to the arcade. And there are games that never got big because I had a couple of test arcades nearby. So for instance, like, I played every variation of Street Fighter 1, including the pressure sensitive button one, where they had like the hit pads, you would punch it.
Yeah.
Like that one, I played a 2-button version, a 6-button version. Like, there was a 4-button version. Like, basically Street Fighter 1, they did a lot of tests as far as like, how are people liking this? And then, I think they eventually settled in on that 6-button version for Street Fighter 2. But I had access to that. And so sometimes I'll bring up the punch version, this pressure sensitive version, and people go, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh my God. Like, where did you grow up? Like, I knew where each version of it was at the time. So
it was a bit like a whack-a-mole, wasn't it? So
it was. It had a big pressure pad with like padding, and like, but guarantee it'd be broken within a few weeks of it starting. So,
I mean, obviously, growing up in the arcades, you got your experiences there and having the consoles at home as well. I'm wondering where kind of your interest in game development came from then. I mean, did you transition to a home computer? How did that work at home?
So I had no thoughts about game design or game development growing up. I was basically, for various reasons, reevaluating my life and trying to figure out what to do. Kind of sloughing along in college, just trying to sort it out. And it wasn't till 4 or 5 friends within a month all stopped me mid-sentence and said, "Dude, I don't know what you're talking about. Go make video games." They were like, I have no idea. Like, literally, you're speaking jargon to me. Go make video games. And it happened in a 4 or 5 week period. It was like once a week, somebody literally stopped me mid-sentence and said, go make video games. In doing that, I started to apply, my, up until college, I was, had a little bit of an overachiever mentality, but I was like, all right. And then I just started breaking it down. What do I need to know? What do I need to learn? I should go get a test job. That's how I got my first job at Blizzard. I like cold salesed my way in. Like, I submitted the crappiest resume you've ever seen, right? Because I'm 19 or 20 with no work experience except at a video game like cartridge shop, and like essentially talked my way into the door across like 4 or 5 months. Like, I basically came in, and was like, I just want a QA job. Like, just get me in there. Let's do this. And then I was a hardcore Warcraft II player. Like, pre-multiplayer, we played some multiplayer, but it was mostly LAN at that point.
Is that what attracted you to Blizzard then?
Yeah, I loved every Blizzard game. Like, I was a fan of Blizzard since Blackthorn, like Rock and Roll Racing, Lost Vikings. Like I was like pushing their cartridges at the store already, and I was like, that's when you first start to get that idea of like, oh, different companies are qualitatively different, right? And then like Blackthorn came out, and I was like, oh my god, it's a side scroller, but it's like sort of shooter bit, but it's awesome because it kind of felt tactical. And so Blackthorn was like my first like that's where I really noticed them. And then I really played. I mean, I must have wore out a couple of controllers playing Rock and Roll Racing, because I was also a big fan of like RC Pro-Am when that came out, and it was like, oh, Rock and Roll Racing, it's RC Pro-Am but cool, right? And so I really played that. I loved Lost Vikings, but I was more of a solo player, so there was like, I think that game's better co-op, or at least couch with a backseat driver. And so I applied to 3 companies with my crappy resume: Blizzard, Activision, and DreamWorks Interactive. And that actually became the first 3 companies in my career. Like I would just move from one to the next, like as I went. So, but yeah, I've talked my way in. QA, employee number 50. And back then you had, it was very common to have permanent QA teams. And, a lot of people don't know this, but Blizzard's philosophy at the time was multiplayer first. So they worked out the game on multiplayer, and then built single player essentially as kind of training for multiplayer, right? Not training, but like they would like, narratively get you ramped across the like 10 missions. And then you're almost tutorialized for multiplayer. Actually, if you play the first 50 levels of WoW, you can see that it kind of follows that, where like advancement is very ramped, per every level.
Were you doing much with BattleNet then?
I mean, it existed and we played on BattleNet, but mostly our testing was on LAN. We had a crew that was like it was 8 or 10 people that were in a pit. We called it a pit. That's maybe not the most attractive name, but we're all in a test pit. As full-time QA testers, I'll have to tell you, the thing that got tested the most was the map editor. So we built maps all day, and we played maps all day. And essentially, I was probably pretty good from a worldwide, POV as far as like players in the world. But once you're in that pit, man, there were guys in there that were phenomenal. They were phenomenally good at Warcraft II, maybe like a level below pro, right, at the time, but not by much. And same with StarCraft. So
that must have really helped you like shape your idea of game design and how it worked.
I would say, and originally I thought I was going to be a programmer or a 3D artist, right? 3D Studio Max was brand new, like partway through my tenure there. And so I was like, oh, this is great. Everybody is going to start now, right? Like with this tool. So I can essentially start learning at the same time as everybody else. And I started building stuff. But I was like, no, I'm not really cut out to be a programmer. So I can't go back to school for that. And like, I like building things in 3D, but it's a little bit more about the storytelling and what I can do with those things. And so it was too slow at that time for me to get to like, I was like, do I want to really be good at this? Because what I was doing is I would work 8 to 10 hours or sometimes 12 and then start my tutorials at night. I slept at the office more often than I went home. Like my roommate was like, this is great. I get a whole apartment to myself, but 9 days out of 10. And then basically I met my first game designer. I was like, oh, that's who I want to be. Right. And it was this fella named Ron Miller. And he still works. He's still in games. But he actually gave me my first design task. And it was kind of an ad hoc thing where I identified like a balance or gameplay bug. And I was like, oh, it's blah, blah, blah. And we were testing the expansion pack. And he goes, well, you know how to use the unit editor, right? And I was like, yeah. He's like, all right, go make that change. Check it in. And then it was super casual. And it was the first official on the job game design that I've ever done. right? And it was such a tiny thing, but it was like, first one's free, kid. Like, it had me hooked. I was like, this is absolutely where I want to go. And then I started planning my career from there. And career in air quotes, because there was no, like, the industry was not the same as it is, even across 5 years in the future from there. But yeah, then I left, went to Activision for a little bit. Like, I leveraged my RTS at Blizzard cred into my next two jobs.
Well, I mean, you did mention DreamWorks Interactive, and one of the titles that you credited with there is a Small Soldiers Squad Commander.
Yeah.
What's kind of the story there then with that game? What memories have you got?
Actually, it's a perfect segue, because, like, basically I got hired at DreamWorks as a tester to do work on Chaos Island, which was an RTS in the Jurassic Park universe, right? And it was aimed at kids. And so I started there. And then that team was moving into doing the next license, which was Small Soldiers. And the lead designer from the previous game was like, I'm leaving. I'm going to go do some other stuff. You guys shouldn't hire from outside. Just promote Chris. Right. And basically that was my first game design gig, was I started working on Squad Commander. Incidentally, that is the only project I've ever worked on in 30 years that came in early and under budget. Like, we were firing on all cylinders. Like, and I pre-crunched. Like, I worked early till late hours, but the shipping was almost like, it was normal. Like, there was a little bit of overtime, but we didn't crunch at the end. Like, basically we sort of preloaded all our work because we knew what we were trying to make very clearly. And I was like, we're 2 weeks early and under budget. Right. Which is significant, because back in those days you had to do a gold master disc, and that had padded time, right? Because you submitted those to publishers for review. That was a PC game. So I think we submitted it to probably Microsoft at the time. Right. And then it might have been EA. I don't remember. I don't remember if we had a relationship with EA then yet or not. But then that has to go through their QA. Right. And there was a process of making it bug free, and then they would print like retail discs. Right. And so the process was way bigger. Now people finish something, boom, they hit launch. Right. And it's more about marketing than it is about like anything else. Back then we had to consider cost of goods, box, manual, like pack ins, like, so Blizzard at that time used to put notepads in every box. Right. Okay. So the nice story about that is like, oh my God, what a free giveaway, like nice giveaway for like the players. Like I lived on those notepads before I even got hired there. And then like later on, I really appreciated them. But the purpose of those notepads is actually to make the box heavy.
Right. Feels better when you pick it up on the shelf. Yeah.
That's right. So you pick it up and you're like, oh, like there's a lot of value in this box, right? Like all of those tactics are gone now that we're digital distribution, right?
And I guess updates as well was a thing that, would it be happening? You'd have to kind of make sure that release was perfect.
Absolutely. And like I say that I miss working on the PlayStation 1 and early PlayStation 2 because they were not online. Like you shipped clean, right? There was no, you could assume that you were not going to patch. Like, we would patch, or a patch would come out in 3 or 6 months, but it would go out with like PC Gamer or like PlayStation Magazine, or like, how do you patch a PlayStation 1? Like there were ways to do it, but it was not clean. Actually, do you remember that Grand Theft Auto, they did an expansion disc, like the London missions or whatever,
yes.
Grand Theft Auto 2, or was it 2 or 1? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But remember that one, you had to put in the original disc, and then it would tell you to put the second disc in. Like you had to get to the main menu and then put the other disc in. And it was like, I just remember as a player, I was like, I refuse.
Yeah.
Like I
not many options there otherwise, is it? Yeah, I suppose.
I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Like I'm too lazy. But then that first modem came out for PlayStation 2 and I was like, it's all over now. Right.
Yeah.
Is it basically, SOCOM did a lot of really cool stuff. Like that was one of the first times they used, like somebody used a camera to map your face to characters. Right. So, but yeah, that modem came out and I was like, we're going to enter like the PC world of like patching, like day zero patches. Like I was so upset. It so went against, like, I wanted to ship clean product. day one, never see it again, take 2 weeks of vacation, start the next thing, right? That doesn't exist anymore. Like
No.
you basically launch as like birthing something into the world now, and then you have to grow it and pay attention to it and send it to school and feed it and all that. Like, it's just like, it's just not done that. It was so clean in the old days. It was a thing, and you set it out into the world.
Yeah, that's why we get those 30 gigabyte day one updates now every time you put a game in your Xbox. Yeah.
Or even like there are times where I'm like, oh my God, they're literally replacing the whole disc.
Yeah.
Right? Like this patch is not a patch. It's literally just a like a binary replacement for the whole disc. Like, you know, or even, you know, the whole file structure. Yeah, so I have some nostalgia for that, but I actually think that plays into like why people like retro games so much, is because they were generally cleaner, and they had like definitive starts and ends, right? And like you knew exactly what you were getting and for how long, and sometimes there was DLC or expansion or whatnot, but generally it was like, this is what it is. I can go have that experience. Now you go play something online and you're like, it's everything to everybody all the time. And you know, I don't have that kind of energy sometimes. Like I don't care.
Well, you did touch on just then a few minutes ago about Trespasser.
Oh yeah.
Which was the game that DreamWorks Interactive developed in 1998, as you mentioned, part of the Jurassic Park world.
Yeah.
Even featured Minnie Driver and Richard Attenborough
Yep.
as roles in the game as well. And I do remember seeing the hype for that game. And I remember a lot of people saying it was going to push like the technology of what Windows PCs could do at the time to the next level. And then I remember the aftermath of that. I was reading before that apparently only sold 50,000 copies. I mean, what happened there from your perspective, and what kind of went wrong with that?
So, by the way, I love that game for what it is, with flaws and everything. But we've probably fought weekly internally about that ARM, right? And like, it is what it is. It shipped that way. But one of the lessons I learned from that, I went to, like, our marketing guy sent me with a PC to the Electronics Boutique Manager Show, and I sold the hell out of it. Like I took the test level with all the physics and stuff, and I sold it so hard. This is possibly part of what went wrong. Is basically we had a hype. We had more hype than the game was really worth, or at least we were hyping the wrong stuff, right? Because when the game came out, all of the things that were hype worthy were very much like experiential. You had to get into the game and understand it and get comfortable with it. Probably like 45 minutes to an hour was worth of gameplay to really appreciate what was going on. So for instance, the software renderer for the 3D was faster than hardware at the time. Like they built like a hot software renderer. It was super efficient. They built everything for that renderer. It was really crazy. The whole game only has something like 60 frames of animation across the whole game, because everything's IK and forward kinematic driven. So inverse kinematics, for those that don't know, is like a way to drive an animation, right? So the dinosaurs would walk by picking a point on the ground, and then their foot would go there, and the muscles would, like, it was a whole physics system built into the muscles. So like that means nothing to the player generally, because they're like, I want to shoot dinosaurs. However, like, it was a really cool system, right? And it was the same thing. If we could have taken that software renderer and applied it to other games, like, the efficiencies that it had were pretty amazing. But anyway, it held the Guinness Book of World Records title for like most returned game in the first week or something like that for a while. So there are things I love about that game, but the execution kind of got in the way of actually allowing some of the brilliance to come out.
We've had a few people on the podcast that have actually mentioned that they worked on Trespasser and stuff, and they
really? Okay.
were fascinated by the technology behind it as well.
Somebody released it. Like, you can go to GitHub, I think, and download the project if you ever want to mess around with it. It's probably like, oh man, the machine you had to use to run it. at the time it wasn't even, it was not past bleeding edge, right? Like that was the biggest problem, I think. I think if it was more easily played on an older machine, I think more people would have given it a chance. But already having a high hardware requirement, and then like doing like, if I have a game design term, it's basically hiding the candy. Like all of the good stuff is kind of hidden. Like you don't get it right off the bat. Like it's not obvious. Then basically it turned into like, why did I buy this game? Right. Which turns into returns.
How did you get to Medal of Honor then? And what was the first time you kind of heard about it and the concept?
Yeah. So I had to give you a little bit of background on that. So the Medal of Honor team, original Medal of Honor team was actually the Lost World 2 team. Right. And so back then we had a thing called like Mode 7. Mode 7? I don't know. I forget what it was called on PlayStation. It was similar to Mode 7, where it was kind of a faked 3D, right? So like if you go back and play games around that time, you'll see characters look kind of like plasticky, right? They're 3D, but it's like a weird projection mode. And so that team got to talking to Steven, and he was like, Jurassic Park, that license is going to be dead soon. Like, you guys should make something else. And he goes, I know. I'm playing GoldenEye, and I'm about to do this World War II movie. You should do GoldenEye World War II. Right. And then basically the team went away. They came up with the concept of Medal of Honor. Right. And even if you look back at the early games, they're all spy games. It's literally GoldenEye World War II. It's like, how do we do this? But the biggest hurdle at the time was, how do we do a first person shooter on a PlayStation?
Yeah.
Right. Like we were all playing Quake 2 at that time. There was no way we were going to hit that speed. And also like dual analog didn't exist. Right. Like the only games that really were first person at the time were like Disruptor. Eventually there was a version of like Unreal, like Jumping Flash was arguably like first person. Like I know there's another first person shooter that I wasn't aware of at the time, but it was like everything had to use that crappy D-pad, yeah. Right? Which is not what you think about when you play a first person shooter. And so that was the big hurdle. So the lead designer from that Jurassic Park game was like, I'm not really interested in this because we can't make Quake. But I'm paraphrasing a little bit. Like he didn't literally say that, but it was essentially like, I think it's an impossible task. Right. And I had just rolled off of Trespasser, and the GM at the time, Glenn Entis, was like, hey, can you go down there and help them, help get them sorted in the interim? And then after about 4 weeks, I came back upstairs and talked to the GM and went, this is a permanent move, isn't it? Right. And so what's really funny is Lynn Henson, who worked on Medal of Honor, was actually my neighbor in the dorms. Like he was down the hall, 5 doors. And so he was already on that team. So it was great. I got to be like, work with my friend and make the first Medal of Honor. And so when we talk about me being the original lead designer, that game was lightning in a bottle. We had a fantastic lead background artist. We had a fantastic lead animator. The producer, Peter Hirschman, was amazing. Like our engineers were all top notch. Like it was basically one of those things where like I sort of walked into this little dream team. And credit needs to be shared for that first run of games with everybody on that team, because without the mix, you don't get anything. Right. It would have just been, look at this crappy thing that should have been a license. Right. Mm. But we really drove to make a great first person shooter for the PlayStation 1. So when you go back and play it, I slowed everything down, like even animation cycles, etc. Like the game is built for stop, aim, shoot as opposed to run and gun, and that affects everything in the game. Animations, how the levels are laid out, where cover is placed, like all of the level metrics were based on this stop, aim, shoot sort of idea, as opposed to run and gun. And that was not common at the time, right? Everybody was playing Duke Nukem, Quake 2, Rocket Arena, and like Action Quake was big, right? Like all of those things were very fast paced, and nobody had really done a more tactical kind of shooter at that time. Well, they have, but not to use hyperbole, but like we were going a slightly different direction, especially because we were constrained by the D-pad.
Yeah, I did hear that apparently one of the design decisions was for the game not to feel like Doom, to be like different to that?
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, when you play it, all those animations are hand done. We had an animation tree that was super extensive, like by hit location and also like sub behaviors. So they'd get hit in the hand and do this, right? And like that led into like all of these little sub like wounded states. And part of that added to that feeling of the enemies feeling kind of like real people, right? So you shoot someone in the leg and they start crawling away, right? That was like, we did that all intentionally to like slow the gameplay down, right? It wasn't just like full body hit 3 times, move on. It was like, we wanted to get this sense that like they actually lived in that world.
And also like it was quite accurate, but I can imagine there was a kind of fine balance to do with the equipment and kind of reloading and being able to still achieve that fun and that gameplay whilst having that kind of slower pace.
Yeah, I had to talk about this with some other industry friends of mine. Is basically, it's all an illusion in the first place. Just that's what we do. We make illusions. It's entertainment, and especially when you think about 3D. Actually, except for VR, all 3D is a sham. It's because it's 2D projection. You're experiencing it on a flat screen. And so it's literally about screen space, like from a design POV, like whether you can see things or not. And so, all of the smoke and mirrors that were pulled out for this one, part of the reason, sorry, is a slightly technical thing. Part of the reason that you don't have like, easy emulation of the PS1 and PS2 game was because of the how many efficiencies we put into the code. Like we had an assembly guy that was calling the brand of CD-ROM and giving it direct machine code as opposed to like calling a general CD-ROM call from software, because it was really tight and small.
He was banging the metal basically.
He was absolutely like, it was like his fingers were on the reader arm, right? Like he was literally in touch with the machine. But the other thing, with such limited RAM space, we were streaming a lot. Like I know a lot of people talk about streaming now, and I'm like, we had to do streaming. There was no way you could play those levels without streaming stuff. And so when you play, like I've got one of those PS3s that has the backwards compatibility in it before they made that like a paid sort of, before they nixed it. It was like run 1 of the PS3, and it had a flip cover and it had little ports for your memory cards and stuff. So I put the old games in. The levels would not stream. And so what I realized is like, oh, right, we were multi-threading like music and like game geometry and textures off the disk. And so we were sending it multiple commands at one time. So sometimes you get the music change and sometimes you don't. So essentially, if you don't know where the triggers are, like I can play it kind of like, oh, the trigger's back here, hold on. And I'll run through it 3 or 4 times, right? To load everything and then proceed on. But like you can't play it in its natural form because it just wasn't meant to. It was highly customized for PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2. It was crazy.
I'm interested as well, obviously, with it being a DreamWorks title, and Steven Spielberg still very much part of the company at that stage. And obviously, he'd done Saving Private Ryan just before Medal of Honor came out. I mean, how much involvement did he have with the game, and how much did he influence the direction of it? I
mean, you can imagine he didn't hang out at the studio every day. Think of it more like an executive update every quarter. That's probably about the right cadence, like something like that. And then sometimes we'd send people over to Amblin to do demos for him. And that's how D-Day ended up in the PlayStation 2 game. So like the actual release order is like PlayStation 1 game, PlayStation 1 PC, right? So Allied Assault, the first Allied Assault, and Underground were pretty close together. So right after we started PlayStation 1, they were like, hey, let's go talk about getting a PC version because like, let's spread our bet a little bit, which is how we found 2015, the guys who eventually became Infinity Ward, to build that first version. And they did D-Day, and I didn't want to do D-Day for PlayStation 2. And they showed D-Day, and they're like, okay, you got to put D-Day in Medal of Honor Frontline. I was very resistant. But in hindsight, I'm glad we did, from a product standpoint. I'm sad that we did from a game ecosystem standpoint, because it was so effective. Like there were circles of game designers that would talk about like, what's your D-Day? Basically, what's your big opener, right? And like it was really hard to beat that kind of spectacle. And like I don't necessarily agree that every game needs to start with something like that, right?
Do you think that helped kind of define the series though?
So I think that's what pushed us into more of a mainstream viewpoint. Was everybody knew D-Day, right? And they had seen Saving Private Ryan, and so like getting what they felt like was, like I said, back to the illusion thing and creating realism versus like simulation. It felt real for them, right? And everything that we did was about making things feel real. And it was like the original PC version was almost shot for shot. Like it had everything from Saving Private Ryan. And so you got this like brain association with this big movie. And back in those days, the graphics are good, but you still had to use a lot of imagination, right? But you had this movie to help fill in the blanks of the visceralness of the thing. If you go back and look at it now without having seen Saving Private Ryan, you're like, that's pretty good for the time. But in comparison to modern graphics, like it's pretty bare bones, right?
But the movie was fresh in people's minds. Yeah.
But the movie was fresh in people's minds, and they basically had a visual that they could attach to and fill in the blanks on stuff. So when a bunch of brown pixels pop up out of the ground, they think it's sand, right? Like it's the story that you're telling yourself in it, because you just saw those big explosions on screen, so you know that like some explosion happened and the sand is flying, and it helps the immersion.
I was wondering, did you have any like historical consultants, and also was there any reaction from veterans at all? Did any of them play the game?
We didn't really interact with veterans until we started doing research for the Rising Sun, the Pacific Theater game. There were a few, so there were multiple historical consultants, but we also had Captain Dye, who was our military consultant, and he's the one that got us to. By the way, the way the weapons are tuned are more relational than they are real, because like when you're talking about intervals of sub 1 second, like it's hard to feel the difference between like an MP40 and a Thompson submachine gun. In fact, they're pretty much the same. But, you know, we created some differences according to people's expectations. But anyway, Captain Dye, he's the guy that trained all the Saving Private Ryan actors. So, you know, Steven said, actually, speaking of Steven Spielberg's involvement, Steven said, you guys should go out and go do training with Captain Dye. And so he did a few different training exercises with us, took us out in the desert, let us shoot some World War II era weapons, took us on maneuvers, explained things. He came in for some talks with the whiteboard, talked about tactics, you know, what we should expect. You know, like it was basically a crash course in World War II military tactics, and also expectations of how things should work, right? So we did that. We eventually did a paintball excursion where because we started to do more squad stuff, and he put us all on squads, and he said, okay, you're this squad. We're going to have a little competition now that I've taught you guys a bunch of stuff. This squad's going to go over here. This is your bunker. Like the other squad doesn't know where you are exactly. They're going to come attack the bunker, and then we'll just score the winners, right? Either you hold the bunker or you take it over. And so, it was a fun day, right? Like and he expected us, he assigned squad leaders, gave everybody jobs, gave everybody whistles. The whistles were for communicating long distances, since we don't have radios. That was very common in World War II. Like you would use other loud signaling tools like a whistle. And then, we learned a lot, and you can see it in the games quite a bit. Later games, though, we sent the whole sound crew out to Arizona with a side of beef. and had them shoot the side of beef and set it up with microphones and a bunch of other stuff. All World War II era weapons. On a different trip, I shot the main gun in a Sherman tank. That was fun. Wow. We did little maneuvers with some Marines outside of Pendleton. They got dressed up in World War II era, like herringbone twill, and we jumped in a Sherman. We had a half track. It was all blanks, but we got to fire everything. I have to tell you, when you fire a Browning 50 cal on top of a like a half track, nothing will prepare you for the feeling of the compression wave.
Wow.
Right? Like as the gas escapes the front of the weapon, it creates this compression wave that pushes on you. And a 50 caliber, it's a half inch, right? Like it's a half inch in diameter. Basically, is it diameter? It's diameter. Like basically, it's a significant amount of black powder, even for a blank. I can only imagine, adding a bullet and a full charge. Like basically, I was firing this thing, and it just felt like. Right. And it's like, it's a very visceral sort of feeling of like just getting thumped in the chest by this like constant rhythm of like compression in the air. And it's just, I don't even know how to recreate that for players. Right. Like, unless we give you a thumper vest, right? There's those like those force feedback vests. So pretty amazing.
That's one point though. I mean, it's the realism of the games was improving with the hardware. Obviously when Medal of Honor Frontline came out, by then it was on Xbox, PlayStation 2. There's a GameCube version as well, I remember.
We eventually did a GameCube version, but like as with all Nintendo ports, it was kind of the lowest common denominator for hardware, and so things were very stripped down for GameCube. It was always challenging.
With the new hardware, I mean, how did that kind of change the design goals then? Now, obviously, you have these more powerful systems. It was
multiple. There were multiple vectors of like advancement, because by the PlayStation 2, we had the DualShock, right? So I could get rid of the D-pad configs. Like basically, if you play the PlayStation 1 versions, those are all tuned for D-pad, even though you could play them with a dual analog. But it was a hybrid, like, build. PlayStation 2, we were able to speed up the game slightly. We did a little bit more standard first-person shooter stuff. By the time we get to Rising Sun, it's like the grammar in the marketplace of how to play a first-person shooter was more developed or evolved, right? And so we could be even more like the pace of the gameplay pace kept increasing. I don't know that we should have went to the Pacific Theater, like doing jungle on jungle graphics at the time. And I know because I worked on Trespasser, I was like doing like jungle foliage and getting that feel of jungle is so difficult. And especially at that time without the graphic fidelity, I think I could go back now and maybe recreate some of the things I saw on our research trips over, in the South Pacific. But at that time I was like, it's just not going to feel the same. It's going to feel like a World War II in Zelda, kind of, right? Like it's going to be very difficult to make it feel real. The other thing is in the Pacific Theater, most people think about like barren places like Iwo Jima or like, and like the imagery in Europe is so much stronger. It's like older buildings, hedgerows, a lot
of the footage people have seen on film reels and stuff.
Just more common, and it's it's organized in a more Western way, in a way that people's brains don't have to like adjust for. Whereas like when you fight in the jungle, it feels like chaotic, right? And so it's very hard to get people to attach to it, and even though that's part of the point.
Interestingly as well, I think in multiplayer you could play as another side, but in the main campaign you wouldn't play as the Axis.
Yes, that's right.
Was there kind of questions about that decision, and did people want to put you in the role of the Axis at all?
We had some discussion about that, but because of the inception of the game being GoldenEye World War II, we always tried to pick like heroic characters, right? And there were no gray areas at that time in our game. Like, it wasn't like Call of Duty had the freedom to go wherever they wanted, and they started introducing more modern storylines where like there were no clear-cut good or bad guys. You could play, like by the time you get to Black Ops, you're starting to wonder who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, like basically at that time we were doing like a World War II hero game. And so it never came up. Well, okay, never is not correct, but it was always like, it was an instant answer of like, you will always be playing an American or allied hero, right? Like I think we let you play Bromley at some point in the Pacific Theater he's an SAS guy. But but if you go back to those games, you'll notice that we did have an internal, I'll just call it a morality line. There are no actual Nazis in the game. Like, we all for shorthand say like, shooting Nazis is always appropriate, right? But every German unit in all of the European theater games were all regular German units. So, and it was never, if you go back and look at the objectives, it's very rarely a kill objective. Almost every objective was destroy this equipment, get to this location. Like, nothing was encouraging like assassination or anything like that. And so like we had these lines that we didn't cross.
You were discouraging civilian injury as well and stuff like that.
Yeah, we just didn't allow it, right? It was kind of like pre Grand Theft Auto, when you would play a game that was set in a city, you'd either drive through them or they would just bounce, right? Like, just get displaced. But the as you go through, this actually made it easy for localization into Germany too. There are no swastikas in the game. There's no pictures of Hitler. There's no pictures of Goering. There's no Himmler. We don't mention them. Like, there might be some mention of them in text, but almost everything was based around like not overplaying the Nazi hand, because we just weren't giving him stage time. It was a little bit more about, like, the games are about the logistics of World War II, right? So take out the radar station, get across the bridge. Well, by the time we get the front line, we had a cohesive storyline. It wasn't just a collection of missions. And so that one was like physically mapped to take you up through Norway to get to different places and then enter into Germany to steal the plane. And so it was basically, there was nothing in there about like it was all about stealing a plane, right? It had nothing to do with kill the bad guy, right? There is a bad guy, kill the bad guy mission at the end, but it's like we needed a boss, right? So
we did mention Call of Duty a couple of minutes ago, and it was on the radar back then. It wasn't the juggernaut that it is today, but the first couple of games had come out. I mean, was it on your radar much then? And did you do much to kind of define your series away from Call of Duty and make it different?
So those are all my friends, right? Infinity Ward came out of 2015.
Yeah.
Spark Unlimited was actually the console team. So that first 3 or 4 Call of Duties was all people that I respected and loved working with. So, there was a little bit of EA versus Activision at the time, because EA bought DreamWorks Interactive a little bit before, like around the time of Frontline. It was kind of like, for my POV, I was like, there's room for everybody. Like, eventually they're going to find their own sauce. Right? Like, the first 2 or 3 games are like pretty blatant Medal of Honor ripoffs, even calling it Call of Duty, right? Which is in the screed for like above and beyond the Call of Duty is like the first sentence in like when you receive for valor above and beyond the Call of Duty, you're awarded this Medal of Honor, right? Like that's like, actually awarded's not the right word, but you're the recipient. By the way, that you were asking about historical consultants and stuff. We had a very close relationship with the Medal of Honor Society. So we had rules from them as well that we couldn't do. I never had it in my brain to like, we got to beat Call of Duty, right? It was more like, they're going to go a direction. Let them go that direction. There's room for both of us. We're going to stay in the spy zone, right? And like stay with this GoldenEye World War II like central pillar. But when they hit Call of Duty 4, I became the biggest fan, because I was like, they found their sauce. Like they've made it their own. They went to modern. I didn't want to ever go modern with Medal of Honor, because the original pillars were so built around this fantasy, like the mythology of World War II, right? Whereas like once you get to more modern wars, like the geopolitical situation gets way murkier, right? Like there's like picking a heroic good guy. I mean, you can even see it in like modern movies. When we do these new military dramas, it's like you have to really focus in on the individual and what their life is like, because they're generally like, they hit those same tropes of like, good guy in the CIA, bad guy in the CIA. Like you're on a team and you're getting screwed by the CIA, right? Like it's like they've set these tensions up that are all like about, disconnection in the goals of different agency units. Whereas like World War II was all like win the war, win the war, win the war, right? And it's very easy to sell that from like a fantasy POV of having everybody like attached to it very easily. And so like going modern, I would just never wanted to do it. In fact, I never consider myself a first person shooter designer. I still don't. Like I just have the most muscle memory there now.
I absolutely loved the intro of Rising Sun with the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Oh, Pearl Harbor, yeah.
That was really well done. And then for me, it's one of the kind of most accurate representations I've played of it as well. And then the fact that, you can't win on it at the very beginning. You're kind of,
right.
Defeated.
Right. That's
right at the beginning.
So yeah, we did some risky stuff in that. So the designer of that mission, his name's Aaron Casillas. You can get a timeline of the Pearl Harbor attack, and he basically condensed it. And so, like, if you know what you're looking for, you'll be like, oh, that's when the Utah gets hit. That's when this happens. That's when this is where the Arizona gets hit. And so he mapped his route with that PT boat to take you through all of the timeline events of the attack on Pearl Harbor. So it's a mini historical lesson of like what happened in that time, but just condensed to like, I don't know, like 20 minutes instead of an hour or an hour and a half.
It's so impactful the way that, obviously it was a massive impactful tragedy, but to have that as the intro of the game as well,
right.
It's a very risky move as well,
Yeah, sure. But so like, so we all signed up for shifts to demo it at E3 in a little theater, right? Like they built like a 500 square foot or maybe 250 square foot theater, right? So it was a little bit long, had a projector, all of this stuff. I brought my PlayStation like dev kit, plopped it down in the back of the room. And basically we practiced a bunch the week before and we had signed up for shifts. There was like 2 or 3 of us that were going to play it. And like, I was so on a wire, right? Because when you demo gameplay, it's very different than demoing regular gameplay. You actually have to operate more like a cameraman than you do as a player, right? So you have to be good and add on to that. I don't want to make everybody in the room motion sick, right? And so there's like you smooth out your movements, you coordinate. Like, look at this point, look at that point, like framing, like I had Pearl Harbor memorized. In fact, I think I could still play it in my brain by heart, but I played it so well that like I was the smoothest on the sticks that basically the EP was like, sorry, Cross, you're playing it all 3 days of E3, right? But what I found near the end of the first day was I heard somebody in the back say, oh, it's a great looking video, but what's the gameplay? Right?
They all thought it was a cutscene.
They thought it was a cutscene because I was not making any mistakes, right? There seemed to be no. So I intentionally started adding like a cough and then hit the stick a little bit to show that it was happening in real time. So I threw this like magician's misdirection into the demo, right? Where I'd be like, and then basically like have the stick drift. And then pick it back up.
Walk into one of the pipes.
Yeah, basically.
Like that.
Yeah, exactly. Walking into the pipes is not enough. Like I had to do something to show that I was physically in the room because it was basically at that point in time, everybody would look back at the back of the room and see me playing it. I'd wave and then go back to playing it. And then basically to show them that it was actual gameplay. And so I would do some quirky camera movements and then get back on track. But it was really crazy. Like, I don't think like people understand how good that looked at that time. Right. Like it was significant amount of work to get that to work right.
Well, another interesting title that you worked on a lot later on was Homefront as well, which I was a huge fan of the Red Dawn film. And this was obviously a reference to that, but a kind of a futuristic world with North Korea invading America, which is just a crazy kind of retro concept. What was it like working on that title?
So that was fun. It was internally Red Dawn. Like, we knew it was Red Dawn. And we had worked with John Milius before. He was a friend of Danny Bilson. And John Milius wrote Red Dawn. Like, he came in to consult with us for a couple of days on the story. And so basically all of the like ties to Red Dawn are intentional. Like, it is.
And
definitely...
then they redid Red Dawn as well.
They redid Red Dawn.
Very similar.
And it's very similar to Homefront. And so like, I'm half Korean, so like I can talk a little bit about the Korean side of this, but like, at that time we had a military consultant. Oh my God, I hope he forgives me. I think it's Jay Kim. Jay, I think is correct. It started with a J. Anyway, he was like, if you're gonna do Red Dawn, it's not gonna be the Chinese that do this, it'll be the North Koreans. And he said, this is much more their tactic. And also what they'll be after is the shale oil in that part of the country. And like, basically there's a resource reason. There is a strategic tactical reason. And then he set us up with the basis for like how to make this a real story. And it's funny because there was some backlash on like, what? This is totally made up. Right. Whereas like we had a whole folder full of like how this could actually happen. Right. Like, based on a couple of different trigger events, like, this scenario was possible. But that was super fun. We didn't have a lot of time. I spent a lot of time in the office getting that to ship in that last year.
Which studio was it? Was it?
It was
Deep
Chaos.
Silver. Oh,
no, it was Chaos Studios for THQ. Like pre Deep Silver, and we did. But yeah, the lead designer Rex Dixon worked on European Assault and Rising Sun. The art director Jason Priest worked on the Medal of Honor console series as well. Like, basically, we had some veterans in there that were, we could talk a shorthand. We're like, oh, we're going to do this thing here, blah, 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 blah. And then we would, sort all that out and like, get it moving. Yeah, and then I went on to THQ, worked corporate for a while. Actually, I met my wife there. The studio was in New York. Mm. She worked upstairs in a different company.
Because we're in Nottingham, UK, and we also had what turned into Deep Silver, and they did Homefront 2 as well.
Because, what studio was that? It was the
Free
Crytek
Radical
studio
before, and then Crytek,
Yeah, Free Radical and Crytek. So I visited Nottingham twice because of that.
Oh, wow.
So them and also Splash Damage.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so I've been out to Splash Damage a couple times, and I worked on Dirty Bomb when I was at Nexon. So, yeah, I've been to the oldest pub, and...
to Jerusalem, yeah.
If you're down again, we'll have a pint.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go give Robin Hood another high five.
Well, Chris, what are you working on these days then, like bringing us right up to date?
So, not a lot I can talk about. I have some side endeavors that I'm doing. I mean, I've got my podcast going. I really think the industry is leaning. I think we're at the beginning of what I'm going to call like an indie bloom, right? And so I'm trying to position myself personally in a place where I can, support that a little bit, whether that's professionally or not, or just mentoring, because the current ecosystem is really kind of messed up, right? And so I think there are ways through it, but I think we're in for some sort of big seismic changes in the game industry, just because economic reasons, but also just there are more people making games now than there ever were, and there's just not enough support systems for them. And so that's what I'm sort of focused on. Other than that, like, Heavy Iron is owned by Keywords. And, we do a lot of AAA co-dev. So there's some Fortnite work, there's some Call of Duty work. We did some Avengers work, but there's nothing like, we're not doing any like 100% titles internal right now. Right. We had a World War One VR something or other that we were working on at some point, but, that's the extent that I can actually talk about it, since that sort of never never went anywhere.
Yeah, NDAs and stuff. I mean, you mentioned your podcast there as well, which is called Coffee with Cross. And I've got a feeling our audience will probably enjoy it as well. I mean, tell us what you do on the podcast.
Yeah, so that's the old podcast. The new podcast is Brain Arcade. So Brain Arcade is where, so it's interesting. If you're doing game design, here, I'll start at the top. The difference between games and linear media, in a nutshell, is that I'm having a conversation with the audience. And I'm allowing them to interact back with me, right? You can't do that in a movie. Like, you're telling a story and they have to either like it or not like it, right? Whereas like everything that I try to make, I'm trying to take the player into account and give them, there are rules to the interactions, but they are giving me feedback just as much as I'm telling them a story. So like I'm adjusting things to them, hopefully on a personal level. So, but that's always been the case. And to do that, you have to be thinking about player psychology, but also like the dev psychology around how you attack those things. And so Brain Arcade came from that. Like, I'm not a psychologist. I just have spent a lot of time trying to reach people through software. And so I have observations, and there are things that like, I have little rules of thumb, right? So when we start to talk about cognitive load, or that place where you start to feel overwhelmed, it's the rule of sevens, right? And so if you apply the rule of sevens, or you know about it, there's seven shapes in Tetris, 7 colors in Bust a Move, 7 letters and numbers on a license plate in America. There are 7 digits in, like, it's basically the limit of what you can hold in your brain. And so when I get feedback that I'm like, oh, people are feeling overwhelmed here, I can go back and apply the rule of sevens and say, am I overloading their cognitive load on this, or like what's happening? Like there's a experiential change. And so the whole podcast is about topics like that, where we sort of explode what I would have considered boring topics for gamers back in the day that I think more people are interested in, because that we've lost. Like, we've literally failed like 3 generations of game designers in mentoring, right? And that we're losing lots of like legacy knowledge, right? Like, not a whole lot of people know anything about why Trespasser worked at all, or even like I can still draw Anne on a whiteboard because it wasn't the body of a human. It was an arm attached to a camera, which is attached to like a cube. You know what I mean? Like it's a totally different thing, but that's like lost to time because we never really talked about stuff back then. And so basically the whole podcast is about like, hey, let's just dive into my brain and start pulling these weird psychological facts out. And then sometimes I'll have somebody with actual psych experience to come vet those, or tell me what I'm, like, I'll say it in layman's terms and they'll tell me what it actually is, right? And then sometimes it's like, hey, let's just talk about the zeitgeist of the game industry, or like, what are people thinking on teams, or how do you manage stress? Or like, everything has like, some mental angle to it, not just, the metrics of a great platformer.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our audience are really interested in game design, obviously, and many of them want to work in the industry from what we've heard. So it's definitely a really insightful listen. So I'll link that in our show notes as well. If you want to check out your podcast. Really appreciate you coming on and taking some time to chat with us this week, Chris. It's been a really interesting interview. So thanks again for coming on.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. You'll have to come on a Brain Arcade sometime too. I think you'll be surprised at the stuff that I can pull out of your brains. Right? We could talk about retro games and how the design was very different back then, and like, we can do some compare and contrast. It'd be fun.
Yeah, let's make it happen. Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks then, Chris. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, guys.